Let's have introductions. Charlie, do you want to start?
I'm Charlie Arnson.
She won't represent.
I am a borough assembly appointed.
Jack Finnegan, liaison from the Ketchikan City Council.
I'm Kim Stanker, the city clerk.
June Dahl, chair.
Sherry Montgomery, member at large.
Deborah Simon, borough resident, and Pat Tully, library director.
Manager Walsh.
Oh, I'm sorry. Delilah Walsh, city manager. And then we have two people online.
And we have DeMello doing our tech work.
Mella's doing the tech.
And online we have
Grant Echo Hawk. Grant, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello everybody. Grant Echo Hawk, here just as a citizen at large, and yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
And Sophia Pilgrim. Could you introduce yourself?
Hi. Hi, I'm Sophia Pilgrim. I'm the high school representative.
Okay. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We are on Tlingit land, and we would like to acknowledge and give honor and respect to the traditional landowners, the Tlingit elders, and past, present, and future generations. We honor the relationships that exist between Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian peoples. Are there any additions to the agenda? Pat, is there any correspondence?
See, no, we don't have any correspondence.
Okay. And public speaking, we have no public. Okay. Ms. Walsh, you are next on the agenda, Library Advisory Board introduction.
That's the first.
I cannot connect right now, so I don't have my notes, but
They're in the packet.
I know, but I didn't.
Oh.
print it.
Yeah.
That's okay. Oh. This is correct. Madam Chair, Library Board member, this is a simple PowerPoint just explaining what the municipal code says regarding the Library Advisory Board. I will let you know, probably this time this year, we may have new code that go with all our advisory boards. It's a project that I'm working on, but considering the other 32 projects ahead of it, it may not happen until next year. So what we're trying to do is just be more consistent on how the boards run, operate, their functions, and just be a lot more clear on how we do things with our advisory boards. Next slide. All right. So under the KMC, the purpose of the board is to advise the librarian, the city manager, and the council on library operations. Obviously, for our functionality, we very much honor the hierarchical system. So as a board member, we prefer you first go through Pat if she can't answer questions or if you have anything more, go through me, and then through the city council. So we just ask that you respect that chain of command just as we would with our departments. In addition to that, if you have any questions at any time, please don't hesitate to ask Pat. So even if it's a question for our finance director or for our city attorney or for even one of the council members, please use that resource and reach out to Pat to get those through, because she as a department head has the ability to go and request city resources and city use. So even if it's to have a meeting at the Ted Ferry, for example, you'd want to make that request to Pat. So on the KMC, the scope is not just operations, but additional matters is designated by the council. So for example, you all are considering the collection development policy. That is something the city, it actually came to city council as a request for the council to look at it. And they remanded that back to the library advisory board and said, let's see what they have to say first before we even take it up as a council matter. There are other projects, for example, in our Ports and Harbors department, the city council wanted them to do a rate study. So they made a request through the Port and Harbors department for the rate study and then wanted the input of the advisory board. So in that example, the advisory board actually held all the public hearings, did the public outreach, did public comment, and prepared that prior to a council recommendation. So there could be special projects that the council would remand back to an advisory board. As you noted, as you introduced yourself, we try to have a diverse group of voices to reflect the community. So we have people who are appointed from the borough at large, by the borough assemblyman, by the city council, by the Friends of the Library, our student representative, and that's to ensure we have that diverse voice group in our board. Obviously, we all want to collaborate, working together to have a better library experience for all. And really what we're looking for is those fresh perspectives, the new ideas and insights to improve the library. If the council wanted to just be homogenous and never change anything, obviously we wouldn't have advisory boards, and that's not the goal. The intent is to have those new ideas and fresh insights from our community. We really do encourage community engagement. So you all have very much been involved with the community through hearings and public testimony. Same thing with some of our other boards. Port and Harbors is the most recent example. They actually did public outreach campaigns in order to get information out to the public. And of course, we're looking for sound advice based on the community needs. You are the reflection of our community. Next slide. Are any questions? Next slide. So the library board is 9 voting members. Everybody here is appointed by the mayor and affirmed by the council. Obviously, the borough assembly does their own recommendation to our mayor, but it still has to be affirmed to our council. So we've got, this is just the breakdown, which we all know, just talked about, city council, borough assembly, residents outside city limits, high school student, at-large members, friends of the public library. Next slide. So this is a question that Kim will cover a little bit better when we talk about the open meetings map act and how we work in advisory boards. You're under the code, your regular meetings are already designated. So you as a board don't have to say, we are gonna every single year pass a new open meetings policy saying when we're gonna meet. That's set by code. And that's your January, April, July, and October regular meetings. The chair can then add additional meetings. So just as today is a training meeting, the chair, after discussion of advisory board members, said, let's go ahead and move forth and schedule a special meeting. We do give public notice as a standard for any city council meetings. A quorum is 5 members required for official actions. So if you're going to take a vote on an item, we have to have at least 5 members present. If we don't meet that, then we don't have an official quorum, and you can't make any official votes on your advisory. You can have discussions, but you can't take any action.
And that is true even if we don't have all of our positions filled.
That's
that
correct.
right?
That is correct. You
It's
have to
still
have the
fine.
5. There always is 4 votes needed to pass decisions. Just like city council, we can have a majority if we want to move a question forward, but when it comes to a final decision, you do have to have at least 4 votes. As long as you have your 5, it's not a majority of the 5, it's 4 votes to pass any decisions.
Excuse me. 4 votes, but do they all have to be the same vote? Could you have 3 people voting yes and 1 voting no? You still have a total of 4
Then the
votes.
question fails.
Oh, really?
Yes, so it's not a majority of the people present or a majority of the quorum present. It has to be at least 4 votes affirming the question. So if only 5 people are here and it's a 3-2 vote, it does not pass. It has to be 4 votes. And that's part of our city rules too. That's how our council works.
How does that work if all 9 people are here and 4 vote yes and 5 vote no?
Then the majority would rule.
Okay, but why is it 4? I guess that's what I
For any
understand.
action to be valid and official, you have to have at least 4 votes. So if you were to vote a question down, 4 votes affirms voting the question down, but typically you don't vote in a negative. Like you don't ask a negative question, you always ask a positive question just under Robert rules. But for any official, you have to have a minimum of 4 votes or the majority.
Or the majority, okay,
Right.
so,
So if only
so
5
the-
people are present.
got it, so that's for when there's like a very few people, that way
Correct.
you can't like squeeze things through and only 3 people say yes, when, you know, that realistically, the majority of the whole board would be 5.
Correct.
Okay,
And that's exactly, now I get your question, June. If you have 9 people, no, it doesn't just take 4 votes. If 9 people are present, you have to have a majority.
I've heard the city council use the term four hands. Now I know what they're talking about.
Right, and it's in our code that for any official action, it has to be 4 votes. For us to move something forward, like in a discussion, it only has to be a majority. But when it comes to the official adoption of an ordinance or official city business, it does have to be a minimum of 4. Robert's Rules is a guide for meeting conduct, so, and it allows for flexibility. So I really want to emphasize this because sometimes we get caught up in procedure and process and we forget about the substance of what we're trying to achieve. So Robert's Rules is really supposed to be a guideline for helping you keep the meeting moving forward, keep it organized, giving everybody the opportunity to speak. But you as a body, you can have a modified Robert's Rules. You can have something to the fact where maybe we don't do the pass, or maybe, you know, we don't do every single thing by Robert's Rules. That's really your flexibility as a board. So we don't have to be rigid, especially here where you're not passing ordinance and law. So the city council is different. For the assembly, it's different because they are passing law, essentially. And that's not what you're doing here. You're advising. Next slide. So what do you have the power to do? What are the power of the lab? So what I did is I took the KMC and I sort of wrote what it says in plain language. We all come on the same page. The first thing is we really want to hear a voice. That's the purpose of the lab. So you can get public input, whether it be our hours of operation. If that's something that you're hearing from community members, hey, the library needs to be open more or closed more or be accessible when school is out. Whatever you're hearing from the community, this is an opportunity to hear those voices and get that feedback and pass it through to staff. Obviously, in an example like that, Pat's job would be, I've got to do an analysis and can I afford to staff extended hours? If I'm going to open at 7 a.m. and close at 9 p.m., is that really possible within our current budget and staffing? The next is your expert advice. So we know Pat and her staff, they have professional education as well as experience to be the experts in their field, but we're also looking at you as an expert in your field. A lot of you are parents, you're community members, you are advocates in the city for other options, other offices. So you've got a breadth of experience that doesn't necessarily exist in just library staff. And so we are looking for your expert advice. We're very lucky here to have people who are involved with social services and with education and with children and with adults and with literacy. And so that's what we're looking for from our lab. Just like the Port Harbors division, when we have that advisory board, we want people who actually use the port and use the harbor to be on that advisory board to help us. We also want to hear about your budgetary insights. The lab does not have the duty or the responsibility to pass our budget, but are these sound budget decisions? If you think Pat should not be spending $1.4 million on books, which she does not, that would exaggerate. You can only spend, 40,000 or so, a very small amount. But if you saw that we are, we're opening the library and we're going to install a $2 million sculpture, that's not really the best use of library funds. And so we want to hear that as we have our budgetary insights. In addition to that, a big part of the lab and having a diverse group is that we want you to help us generate that public interest, to foster engagement, to encourage library programs and activities. I loved during one of the discussions a few months ago, one of our board members said, well, maybe we need to improve our card catalog and the way we label things. That's great insight for our staff because we live in a world where this is just things that we do all day long and just take it for granted. Where you live in a world as a library user, you're listening to that community. But in addition to that, we would like for you to advocate those things that we are doing in the library. We have a fire safety training coming up for families. We did our Chinese New Year. We want you to advocate for all the things happening at the library. And I know all of us know there are one out of 58 programs, maybe controversial or maybe cause some pushback from the community. But there are 57 other programs that are really, really reflective of our community. We want our lab and our advisory board members to encourage and engage and spark those interests. The other thing is adapting to needs. In addition to taking on those tasks as designated by the city council, is our library meeting the evolving needs of our community? Is that happening in today's world? Are we meeting the needs of our transient community? And what I mean by transient is the in and out, not transient like transit, but a transient community has people constantly coming in and out. Are we meeting the needs of that community? We have our Coast Guard community. Are we recognizing that part of our community? We have our Native community. Are we recognizing that part of our community? What parts of our community are we fulfilling the needs for and for whom? And so that's why, again, we need that diversity of our board. Next slide. So the other one, the responsibilities of the lab chair are not codified in the KMC. So those are things that we're actually going to codify in the future. So it's very clear for everybody. But typically what happens, and this is what we're following as far as what we've done in the past and what we do with other advisory boards. It's interesting, one of our boards actually says all these things. It's in the code. And I can't remember which one it is, but it's actually codified. So you elect the chair at the first meeting of the year. So every January, we elect a chair, which we've done. The chair presides over the board meeting, just like the mayor does over our council meetings. The chair is to prepare the agenda in collaboration with the library staff. So typically, your director will contact board members for agenda items, or June will tell Pat, these are the things we need to have on the agenda. You may recommend agenda items on prior meetings for the next meeting, which we've seen happen. And then in order to set that agenda. So I put a bullet on here, recommend an agenda request form. So this came up, I think it was board member Arntz, you know, what exactly are we doing and what is the action item on the agenda? Are we really clear to make sure we're addressing the topics, being clear? And I think that was your comment, we have to be very clear on what we're asking and what we're doing. So we actually have an agenda request form that we don't use it in city council. It's only if it's something murky or if the council hasn't given beforehand, or if it's going to take a significant, maybe just one counselor wants to explore it, but it's going to take a significant resource sink from our staff. We do have a form and we can modify that for you in order to make sure that the motion is very clear and the actions are very clear and we're all on the same page to that agenda. So I think that would be a good step for meeting that request, clarifying agenda items.
And I think we in fact do have later on in our agenda, I've adapted the request form and for board consideration.
So thank you for that. And you do, we want to know what we're coming in to talk about so we don't get drifted off and we use our time efficiently and wisely. I think next slide is there one more? Nope, it's not. Okay, got that. Are there any questions or? That's it for me.
Oh, you have number 2, you have ethics training.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry I'm chewing gum, but
I
it's
think
so dry right now.
in response to the code and the library advisory board is probably the most complete on how your board is selected, except it doesn't talk about selecting your vice mayor in case your chair is absent.
Yeah.
It doesn't even talk about putting together a pro tem from the body. So these are things that we need to get incorporated into the code, but have it across the board for all of them, because some of them don't even talk about how to elect their chair or their, you know, so there's a lot of things. I think it's inconsistent because maybe the library board was created and then a year later the Port and Harbors board was created, and they're all done by ordinance, not necessarily did they look at, oh, this board, let's kind of make it all the same. Because they're all different numbers too. They're not all 9 board members either. Because I think the museum has 30, don't
I
they?
think so.
They do.
They have a huge number. So it makes a big difference when you're trying to get a quorum or a vote when you have 13 members versus 9. And I think they have requested a change on that as well. Because it's really
It's hard to
get that many members to come to a meeting, to at least have a quorum to even talk about it and have a meeting. So those are the things that we've had a meeting about, and we just need to, but you know how things are in your office, and another fire comes over top of you and you're trying to do other things. So But in any case, go ahead, Delilah. I'm sorry. I was just, since we were still in that code part, now you're into the ethics part.
I think we can bring up the ethics PowerPoint. So this is a PowerPoint that I revised from our council training. We actually have the same exact training with our city council members. So this is not something just designed for the library. I just use the same PowerPoint background, but it is something. What I did is I took the ethics training from our city council and then adapted it, because obviously you don't have the same fiduciary duty they do when it comes to budgeting, purchasing, and things like that. So we can start on the first line. All right, so we actually have a code of ethics in the Ketchikan Municipal Code, and that applies to all bodies, employees, everybody involved with the city. So it doesn't apply as much as our advisory boards, but again, I'll pick on Port and Harbor since that's the most recent one I've been working with. If there's a financial disclosure, if I'm going to offer a discount to a certain cruise line on the port, and it's up to the Port and Harbor's advisory board to recommend that discount, but I have a personal interest, financial interest in that line, obviously that's something you need to disclose. I can't imagine any financial conflict happening in the library advisory board, but we do have to disclose if you think what's going to happen. It does outline things of prohibited acts, so you can't vote on things that are of personal interest, you cannot campaign on city time and money, things like that. Improper gifts, we can't accept any freebies essentially in order to support a plan or idea. Again, I don't see those being conflicts really in the library advisory board. I know in New Mexico, it's actually state law that county commissioners, elected officials can't receive a free ride on a train. And that's because I tell everybody I come from a very corrupt state. So we have these weird constitutional provisions that had to be in place before we could be accepted into the union. And that's one of them. Railroads were very powerful back then. Obviously, no improper influence in grants, contracts, or leases. We have provisions about leaving city service. So if you were to leave city service, you can't just become a consultant the next day. So there are provisions for that. Obtaining surplus property, you can't just, again, outside employment. Those ones I have italicized because I don't think it'll be a lab issue. Conflicts of interest should be disclosed. Conflict with collective bargaining agreements and false representation of council positions obviously doesn't represent the library board. But the big thing is ethics is more than just what's allowed. So you have compliance with laws and then you have compliance on the ethical side. So compliance is doing what you're legally required to do. I'm legally required to do it. Ethics is what you're doing, what you should do. What is the right thing as a public figure. Next slide. And these things, if I get too long, I apologize. I was very involved with ethics training back home for certification. So I love just going off on a tangent. So ethics and self-awareness, this is a big option. You have to be aware where your own prejudices and your own biases are as you're tackling ethical questions. So you want to balance the respect of other people's values and beliefs, even if you disagree with them, but at the same time, stand up for your own values and beliefs. And if somebody disagrees with you. So it's a really, especially in a public forum, it's a really delicate balance because democracy is quite ugly, but it's also very beautiful in that all voices are heard. However, not all voices agree. So it is an ugly process, but it's an actually very beautiful process to get us where we need to be. I was talking to Councilor on Monday, Councilor Flora, and I said, I didn't like how that turned out. He said, yeah, but we compromised, so nobody's happy. That's kind of where it goes on balancing that. Being aware of different ethical and professional standards that apply in different contexts. There are acceptable behaviors in some cultures and even professional standards that may not be in others. The big one is always be honest with yourself about your own shortcomings. We're all human and imperfect. We strive to be better every day, but not one of us is yet walking on water. And so we just have to be aware that we are flawed also and being honest about that. I love using this doctrine of relative guilt. I just like the phrase. And what that means is when people start to rationalize their behavior of, well, I'm not so bad as that guy. Like what I did was, it's nothing compared to what so-and-so did. And so I just love the phrase of doctrine of relative guilt. And That one and sophistry, those are my two favorite phrases this year. The other is the continuum of compromise. This is when you start to compromise your ethics. First, you're aware that, this might be wrong, that I might be getting into a gray area. And there's the rationalization. Well, it may be an ethical gray area, but it's really for the greater good. It's okay if I lie a little bit or if I'm not completely honest, because it really is for the greater good. That's when you start to get a little fuzzy or more fuzzy. Then you've got the minimal violation of what's acceptable. Like, oh, it's okay. Nobody was really hurt. I didn't really harm anybody, but I got my way and it's going to be fine. And then you get into serious violations, blatant ethical violations. And then, of course, you have absolute corruption. So my husband was born in Chicago, so we always joke who has more elected officials in jail, Mexico or Chicago. So, my husband's trying to spell felonious as his, but so you know we've seen those examples of absolute corruption. But that's what happens. You know, you come with that sort of, you start to rationalize bad behavior, and then it really grows into a full-on ethical conundrum. So I always start, when I worked in banking, I was over tellers, and one gets away with stealing $5, and it always grows. In my experience, I can tell exactly when I know somebody's going to start stealing from the till. You can just see it progress. Next slide. So fiscal responsibility, I won't really go through that too much because, again, this is a slide that we shared with our council, but it's not really relative or related to the lab, simply because you don't make those financial decisions. So these are just fiduciary responsibility and what's considered a conflict as a fiduciary. But we can skip over that slide. And when is a conflict? In a nutshell, any situation where your personal interests could influence decision making. So you have, again, that balance of your personal values and commitment and ethics versus your personal interests. So those are completely different things. So these could be things like a member asking for special treatment. Pat, I'm on the library advisory board. Could you just open an hour early and let me in? Because I'm going to be busy and I need to go take care of some things with the library. But could you just let me in a little bit earlier? Because, you know, I'm a board member. Not that that's ever happened. Now I clearly disclose that. That's just an example. Calling the library director to give a recommendation to hire a new employee. And so that one's really a grade line because you may be that employee's reference and be able to give that as a professional reference, but you want to make sure that only appears on the application. That you didn't call Pat up and said, well, I know Patty and she's great and I really think it would do you good to hire her. And then of course if you add something like, well, if you really want me to support you, Pat, you need to hire Patty. That's completely blatant. Again, none of these have ever happened. I want to disclose that clearly, but that's an example. So what you might think is an innocent, hey, I know Pat, let me just give her a call, is a very different weight than when you're an advisory board member. So if you're just Joe citizen and you say, hey, I know Pat, I'm going to give her a call, you can do so. But really as a lab member, you just want to maybe put your name on the application and let them know it's okay to use me as a reference, but I'm not going to use my knowledge and influence to make that higher. A member using the relationship with council members or the mayor to strong arm others or threaten an appointment. So telling the other lab members, well, if you don't go with me, I'm going to make sure the mayor never appoints you again. And again, for full disclosure, it never happened. It's only an example. A member who disagrees with the board and then advocates against it after that decision's made. That's actually an ethical conflict and violation. You as a board have made a decision. And even though if I voted one way and the rest of the board voted another, and then I went out on my own and said, well, I'm just advocating as a citizen, but you're really not. You were part of a collective body, your vote didn't prevail, and you have to respect that as a majority and not advocate against your own board. A member who uses committee information to personally benefit. Can't think of any examples of that right now, but that would be a conflict. Next slide. The next is another ethical principle of equal representation. So this is the principle of fairness that requires us to treat everyone equally Just as, and I've seen June do it quite often, she will invite people to speak in order to have their voice completely heard. And it may not be exactly to the rule or to a minute, but she's being very open to make sure all voices are heard and everybody's equally heard and treated equally. So we do not discriminate against people based on race, religion, gender, sex, or any other factor. The principle of justice requires to ensure that every person has the same opportunity to succeed. So when it comes to our board, we try to remove barriers that prevent people from reaching that potential. In the example of the lab, you all are very open in that you will accept public comment by email or by letter or by writing. So maybe a person cannot make it physically to the meeting. We broadcast in order for our city to have access. Not everybody can come visit at the lab meeting in the evenings, but we offer that broadcast opportunity. The principle of compassion requires us to help those who are less fortunate. That means we want to support programs and policies that promote equal rights and opportunities. Our library is an excellent example of that. Our collection is very diverse. So I know a friend of mine was just there yesterday. We were talking because his son is in my class and said, hey, I found this huge book on saints that I can check out, and we'll have those discussions at home. And then I have another friend who was just talking about a health book that they found at the library. And, myself, my daughter wants to read about murder mysteries. It's a very, very diverse principle of compassion and helping those and promoting equal rights and having that open to everyone. And we want to have that equal rights as far as economic growth and prosperity. And what's beautiful about our library is we have those options for people who may not have connectivity at home. They can use our library computers. You may not have references at home. There could be kids who don't have access to the phone and to their Wi-Fi to do research papers. There's a lot of people in our community who can't even fill out an application because it's only can be done online. And so things like that, in addition to having audiobooks and videos and other means of materials, to have that available. So that's our concept of ethical equal representation. Next slide. In addition to that, we actually have an Equal Rights Act or code in our Ketchikan Municipal Code. So it applies to all public places, which includes the library, as well as their service and usage. It does prohibit denying access or services based on any of the protected characteristics listed. No advertising discriminatory practices. There are exceptions with single gender fitness facilities, which doesn't apply to the library. But really all it does, the real point of that code is to say everybody has equal access and treatment to every city space, which includes our library. Next slide. So the last slide I wanted to share is these are the organizational values adopted officially by our city council last April. So the mission statement of the city, that's always been the same, that we want to provide quality municipal services as efficiently and effectively as possible within laws, code, and whatnot. But the core values that the council adopted were transparency, equal representation, and fiscal responsibility. So everything we do as staff, we have to look through that lens of transparency, equal representation, and fiscal responsibility. So in the example of the lab, our public hearings are very transparent. We broadcast them. Everybody's allowed to speak their mind no matter where they sit on an issue. Again, equal representation. We try to make as many accommodations as possible for people to be able to make those comments. And then when it comes to fiscal responsibility, are we using our time and resources well? Are we being responsible for what we do? So those I just like to share. I'm really proud of the council for adopting that because those are the lens that we look through as staff members when we take actions moving forward. I think that's it. I could go on. Poor city council. I gave them so many examples of ethical violations because I have so many stories, but I got to be a hearing officer in New Mexico for like 5 years and I heard everything. So, I went all around the state listening to these things.
Okay. Advisory board train.
Well,
You're up.
I think Delilah covered quite a bit of stuff. I have a presentation. I did bring, I gave mostly everybody a manual before, a training manual with just some minor little thing, you know. Oh, it's this one. You're not gonna have a copy of it.
The binder? I've got
Yes,
this.
you have the binder,
I have
but
it.
none of this.
Oh, no,
It'll be up here.
right.
It's because everything's in the binder, and I think I've done 2 training kind of so far, but
Yes.
we have a couple new people, and those people are the ones that didn't get a binder, so if they want one, they could let me know, and I can certainly get one to them. Like Delilah had said, you are an advisory board, and I thank you for your service because you don't get paid for it. It's all a volunteer, and it's something that's all of our boards, getting people to apply and coming up and donating your time. It's really awesome. So basically, you have your agenda. I'm gonna just do some really basic stuff. And your agenda is what you publish prior to your meeting to inform the public, which kind of goes hand in hand with your Open Meetings Act of what you'll be discussing and possibly taking action on. It doesn't necessarily mean that you will actually take action, but it means you can take action. So you have your agenda. I know, do you do the agenda, Pat, or
Yes, we kind of
based on your
work on it.
prior meeting? Maybe somebody will have a future agenda item, and you'll have your agenda, and you have your, just like tonight, we're following our agenda, and it keeps everything kind of running smoothly and keeps people moving forward. And but all of our boards have adopted, and it's in the code, and actually it does say in the code for the library for the Robert's Rules of Order, and it's kind of what you're using in most of your boards. If you're on the assembly, if you're on the council, even the borough assembly, they use Robert's Rules of Order. So basically, this is probably what you're charged to do. And I think Delilah even said that as your responsibility is working together to represent the interests of the library. You have the authority to advise and make recommendations for a public entity, but has no authority to establish policy or make decisions for a public entity. And that is the Alaska state statutes, not so much our code, but that's what the state statutes state for an advisory board. Next slide. So during your public meetings, and Delilah kind of covered with respect to the democratic process, honor the role of the chair, decorum in debate, demonstrates effective problem solving. And these are kind of things you guys do amongst each other. And by using Robert's Rules of Order, it allows you to raise your hand, ask for permission from the chair, and you have your discussion after someone's made the motion. With I'm just kind of going over here with the OMA, and we invite the public to speak. We welcome our speakers. We practice active listening and ask clarifying questions, and we follow the Robert's Rules of Order. The advisory board was created, and we talked about this too, by advising the librarian, the city manager, the city council on the operations of the library, and that is also in the code. So there is a thing in a little section in that was done a long time ago about the roles on the advisory board, just basic things to keep in mind when you're on a board. Next slide. Wherever I'm at. So when you're this little slide, because Robert's Rules of Order or parliamentary procedures used to keep the meeting on track. But it's also, you can make amendments to actually that slide should have been after, I'm all messed up here. The common motions, and I can get this to you too. I put this in here because there's just common motions, and then of course this one is to make amendments. There's to postpone, and really what you want to do is keep it as simple as possible. And I know there's a lot of people that read the book. This is even the short version of the Robert's Rules, and I noticed June also has a short one, but I have one that is 3 or 4 inches thick. So I mean, you could make the whole thing, but that's not the point of a board. The point of using Robert's Rules of Order is to work with each other and just have a little decorum during the meeting. And but in your little book I handed out, there were some also, you know, if it's about the motions themselves, or what requires a second, what requires a majority vote. A lot of times, well, you're gonna make you do make motions. You make motions, and maybe somebody might amend that motion. So, but you'll need to, once the motion's been amended, then you need to discuss the amendment and then come back down, because that'll either pass or fail. And you're gonna go back down to your main motion, and maybe that main motion is approved as amended, or maybe it's approved the way it was originally read. So that's your, you know, most of the time we have amendments, and we have a lot of these other motions you're probably not going to use. I mean, that's this, but you are going to use an amendment, and that's what this little slide's for. So we don't like to make amendments to amendments to amendments. You want to deal with one amendment at a time. It just keeps things a little smoother going through the procedure. So
We have learned about friendly amendments.
friendly amendments. And next slide, what's on the next slide there, Mello? Because I got all mine messed up. And that's the common motion. So that should have been first. And I know in this book, I had put in another little sheet that had just some basic things to do. Because like we just talked about amendments, so you could kind of like postpone indefinitely, and that's used to kill the main motion. And then, but it requires a second and a majority vote. You can't take the rights away from the body. So once a motion is made, someone's going to second that motion, and then the chair will open it up for a discussion. And normally it goes around the table and everybody has a chance to speak, to it twice. And usually you can make a decision by then. So this was kind of just a little sheet on making motions, or adjusting your motion, or amending your motion, or whatever you're going to do to that motion. But everything gets voted on by your body. And like Delilah had said, which you have 9 members, 5's your majority, 4 makes a decision, or the majority, how many members are present. Next slide. So, know how these all got turned around here, and I'm sorry. I got mine, my meeting basics. So we talked about quorums. We talk about the chair facilitating your meetings, and all your questions and comments should go directly to the chair. If somebody else is speaking, you don't interrupt that person. You would raise your hand until you're recognized by the chair to make your comments. If a board member wishes to respond to another board member's comments, you should wait and still be recognized by the chair, but you should keep everything. You can talk to other people's comments, but you don't want to. You want to be nice. However, we're going to say that. So, next slide. So our other thing that we are guided by as governmental entities is the Open Meetings Act, which is a state regulated, that came about because people were holding meetings in private and making decisions for the public at large without their comments or their coming in and speak to it. So basically the Open Meetings Act keeps things open and transparent to the public. We didn't have any speakers tonight, but we advertise, we put the agenda, we post your meetings. You advertise your meetings in certain places so that people know that there's going to be a meeting for the Library Advisory Board. We've updated our website to include all those things we post. We're actually recording the meeting and we do post that after the fact on our city website. So those things are available to the public and they can always come and speak to it at the next meeting if there was something that they missed. But we don't record it like on the website during the meeting. It's posted after the meeting. And tonight was a training meeting, so that's probably why you don't have because normally you have quite a few speakers come to the meeting, so.
And to pull on the thread from Kim, the Open Meetings Act does not require the broadcast option. That's
No.
just something that we do as a city. And I know the council had asked if we could start doing broadcast of our advisory board meetings. I think the museum, we don't, just because it's such a big group. And they have a very different vibe that they go through on their discussions, but they're still noticed publicly.
They are, yeah, and we do also record the Port and Harbors meetings as well. And they're now being held here. Everybody, we used to hold them at the library, the Port and Harbors held them at their facility down here, and we're just kind of consolidating all in one spot. And it is because the equipment's here that we're able to record. But I think it's more transparent to the public so that they're able to see what's going on and maybe because of that, we have quite a few applicants that are applying for these to be on these boards, which in the past, it was really hard to find people to sit on the boards. And it's been really nice to see them all full. Even the museum has a good number of applicants. In Port and Harbor, I think we're only missing one. And you guys have a full board, so I really don't, the next slide, Demella, do you, some people ask if you can do an executive session, and no, you cannot. Executive sessions are private meetings, and they're only can be done for like if you're reviewing someone for the an evaluation, or if it's a legal claim or being sued, or if it's a IBEW type, and you guys have none of those things here. So a lot of people asked if they could go in and you can. Everything here is open. Next slide would be, I think they all got, these are potential Open Meeting Act violations that to be aware of, like 4 or more board members talking at a grocery store. Even if it's unintentional, still could be considered a meeting, even if you're talking about the oranges. People see you guys, and if they see you together somewhere, they will assume the worst. And it's even the same way for you as an elected official. If you're seen places, they just kind of always want to think that you're talking about something else rather than what you may be talking about. So you really want to be careful. If you're going somewhere and there's 4 or 5 of you there, it might be a good idea to not, go if it's, that many there, or not sit together. I know that we advertise for our people if they're attending a function, and there's several people that are attending. It just depends on what you, the other problems people can run up against in violation is Facebook, social media, and emails. So we always suggest that if somebody's creating the email, that they send it to the chair and blind copy the rest of the board members, only for the fact that if you hit a reply all, you're not going to be creating a meeting. If you hit reply all, you're going to just get the chair. It kind of stops that possibility of a meeting being created unintentionally. And I'm not saying that it does happen, but it can happen. So those were kind of things that should have went with the other slide, and I'm sorry that they are not all together.
Can I ask a question about this?
Sure.
So my understanding is that you should not be emailing everybody, and you should not be blind carbon copying anybody. You should just email the director and the chair, and for that dissemination to happen, that should be coming
From Pat.
from
Pat.
them, like it, because you open up, that is engaging a meeting if you're blind carbon copying
Well,
4 members or more. So
well,
I don't know that is.
Well, I'm saying if you're sending out information, let's say you're sending out your agenda. Don't you guys send out your email, your agenda by email?
Pat
Only
does.
that, yeah.
Only
Right,
Pat
and
does.
yeah,
Only
and that's
Pat
something
does.
I ran into trouble with that, last, December, I think, because I wasn't blind copying. But, so, if
And it
I
wasn't
got-
that we were trying to
yeah,
send information that wasn't,
yeah,
it's not information like about the meeting, more with the agenda, or let's say I have additional information from one of the agenda items, but it needs to go to everyone.
mhm.
How would you send that out? Would you just,
Well, I think what,
are you sending
What-
it out to everyone, or are you? just
right,
sending
so,
it-
what I'm doing now is I send to June and blind copy everybody else with the agenda. And I think that's okay because basically I'm not a member of the board, I'm just staff.
Yeah.
And basically, I'm just making sure by blind copying everybody that people can't reply to the board and therefore create a
And I
meeting.
think, I'm sorry, that's what I
Yeah.
kind of was.
But I
alluding
shouldn't
to.
be doing that.
No.
Yeah.
I
No.
shouldn't be BC.
No,
Yeah.
because when I'm sending stuff to my council, I'm staff as well.
Mm, mhm.
But we don't, when I get something from a council member, it's directed to me.
Mhm.
But if I'm sending out a packet items or agenda items, it's going to all of them. But I want to make sure that they don't just hit reply all and all of a sudden, so I don't include all the people I don't copy everybody
Yeah.
involved.
Yeah.
But everybody has to get the information, so I do blind copy them.
Mhm.
Right, and I understand because that's coming from staff,
Right.
and so, and because of like.
But yeah, you
FOIA,
guys should
open
not
meetings
be-
and everything, that's all recorded.
Mhm.
But that says direct the email to the chair and blind carbon copy other other board members.
Yeah.
To me, that would be a violation.
I
So-
think that's correct. Like board
Yeah.
members, anything you have should just be directed to the
Right.
chair, to Pat. You're absolutely correct.
Mhm.
Staff that's more applicable to them.
And this was for the city council, and I'm sorry, so we were reading that over and yeah, because if 4 or more members are exchanging emails, it is considered a meeting and needs to be avoided. So,
So
Yeah.
that's just our
Yeah.
Yeah.
my practice as a planning commissioner and as an assembly member is if I have any communication that needs,
You
that I
go
want
directly to the chair.
disseminated to
and
the
that's
board
kind of
during
what I
the
meant
meeting,
to say, was
it
you
goes
meant to the
it
chair.
goes to
Good.
Pat.
Yeah.
And the chair can be
Mhm.
included in that as a point of information, but I'm not going
Yeah,
to
because we do
send
not want to create
emails.
any type of meeting between
Yeah,
board members.
thank you.
So, and I know that you guys have kind of worked that out.
Mhm.
Well, I did make a mistake earlier this year, and I really thought from our training last year, it was okay to email when it dealt with the next meeting. And so I would say, do you want to have this meeting? I should not have done that. I should have just made the decision myself. So I will sin no more.
But But when you're at your next meeting, your meetings are already in your code. You meet
Mhm.
quarterly.
Mhm. This
But-
was a request for a special
A
meeting.
request for a special meeting, and you don't have like if we're in our code, if you're requesting a special meeting, you go through the manager or myself, and usually you have a co-sponsor or the mayor. You have one or more person that's asking, and then the code, it has the mayor and I think one other person that needs to call a special meeting.
Mhm.
But in your code, you have nothing to,
Well, basically, the city attorney said it's the chair's decision, period.
Yeah.
So that's how I would operate.
and those are things we need to put into
Mhm.
the code
Mhm.
so that that doesn't
Clear.
happen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because you need to know,
Mhm.
who creates a special meeting.
Yeah.
How do you get agenda items on your, who puts those
We'll
together?
be discussing that tonight.
Okay, so basically you're discussing them at the meeting and then that'll be on your next agenda for the meeting to actually make a decision on.
Mhm.
Okay,
So you're done?
well, I think I had one more slide.
Excuse me.
Sorry, I'm almost done. Is there one more slide there, sir? Records, all, so whatever you're using, and I did, like your minutes, your agendas, your contracts, are all discoverable. Your emails, whatever you're using, whatever device you're using,
Mm-hmm.
if someone were to sue and say, hey, I want all of your emails, you have to give them up. And whatever device they're on, if it's on your phone, if it's on your tablet, it is considered discoverable. So, text messaging, social media platforms, there's all kinds of ways. And we have a whole records management program in place as well. So like we issue, and we're not going to, of course, issue you guys all iPads, but you do have, you bring your own laptops and your own phones, and just be careful, whatever you're texting and email to people, like we were just talking about, those are discoverable records and people can request them. And it doesn't have to be a work laptop, or it could be your private phone. It can be wherever you're putting that information. And that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about was that. So, and I think that is the last slide was on records. And I'm sorry if I'm a little confusing. I'm not,
It's all good.
okay, well, I should have printed you guys out some. Last time we had done a whole booklet on it. And if there's any questions, I can answer questions, or if you guys want to move on, we can move on.
Are there questions?
No, I just would like to make a comment. That's okay. I appreciate the cheat sheets.
Uh-huh.
There's actually a couple different cheat sheets about motions and when it's appropriate to interrupt and that sort of thing in the booklet. So I really appreciate all this work that was done to have this in one place. Thank you.
And I can put that together for the other two people that did not get one, but they were going to be here tonight anyway. So it was, but yeah, it's kind of nice to have a guide and to keep it kind of simple and still get your business done.
Sophia, did you have any questions?
No question.
I heard a little bit.
I heard a little bit.
Yeah.
Sophia, did you have a question?
We said no.
Oh,
Okay.
Oh,
questions. Thank you.
Grant, do you have a question?
No questions for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Grant.
okay. All right.
Oh, excuse me.
I can't find that, but I thought earlier in a slide it said three board members in the same place could be construed as a meeting, and in your slide it said 4.
It's whatever's in our code, and the code says 4,
It's actually under state law
3,
2.
2.
That just changed.
Oh, really?
So that's in Mitch's, I think it'll be in my memo. to
I
you
have, yeah,
for the
the,
next meeting, so.
Okay.
And it's 2 individuals that are coming together to discuss lab business.
Intentionally.
Yes.
Okay.
So if you happen to be at a
We're
BZA
like
meeting.
library users,
Yeah.
and we all go to the library at the
Yep.
same time all the
Yeah.
time.
So, and it would just be, you can't discuss the lab business.
Mhm.
So you can discuss city business and anything else. But technically, if you're meeting with the intention of addressing lab business, it's actually 2 now. And that's
Yeah.
kind of the.
well, the state statute is 4462-310, but it does say a gathering of 3 or more members, but I have not looked at the updated version. Whichever is less are present, and the gathering is prearranged for the purpose
Correct.
of considering a matter upon which the governmental body is entitled to act, and the governmental body has the only authority to advise and make recommendations for a public entity, but has no authority to establish policies or make decisions for the public entity. So that's what the state statute reads. But if that's been changed to 2, then, and that's AS, if you're writing that down, Charlie, I don't know if that's in there or not, but I know we've talked about
Did you say 44?
44.62.310 H2B. And I didn't realize that had been changed, so,
Yeah, I can't remember the exact language. It's in my memo to the lab for your next meeting.
Okay.
And Mitch's quote is in there.
yeah, and Mitch had put that whole thing on the open meeting deck. He's got his.
Yeah, I think we've got it in the.
Paperwork.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
saw.
Agenda packet, which is
Yeah.
quite extensive and talks
Mhm.
about the Open Meetings Act.
Yes, Jen.
Because we're
Question for the
regularly.
chair, for the manager, if I may, is that for advisory bodies only, or is that for all?
Yes.
Okay. 'cause-
Yeah, it has to do with the advisory language.
Yeah.
That's what-
For advisory, only bodies.
Thank you.
Yeah, not you guys.
Okay.
Yeah, how about,
Well, like for our council,
I was going to, I was like, what?
but we advertise 3 or more baby antennas, but you still should not be circled around the
Sure.
table
Mm.
talking because you are in the public eye you're always gonna be, there's somebody's gonna think, oh, they must be talking about that, even though you not had anything to do with it. You might even be talking about how good the food is.
Okay, for clarification, let's say I called up Charlie and said, you know, Charlie, I'd like to just talk about this situation. I don't really know how I feel yet. And so Charlie and I get together for coffee. Do we have to announce it to the world or?
Well, that would be the,
If you're getting together to talk about library board business, I would not advise it. It wouldn't technically be a quorum because you're not gonna take a vote, you're not gonna take action, but I would advise against it.
and the other thing is some people, or I'm not saying anybody in this body, but I've heard they could meet with you and get your opinion on that, or maybe even try to give you their opinion on that. And then tomorrow they're meeting with you to talk about the same subject
Oh.
and they're creating this type of a meeting by individuals. So yeah, you really want to be careful about going out there and reaching out to people just to talk about this particular thing that you're going to be talking about on the agenda next meeting. Because maybe the agenda came out and you're talking with all these people and you are creating some type of, even though it's an individual, you're influencing or talking to, creating, because you could talk to all 9 board members.
Mhm.
Sharing opinions and having discussions, those are, and everybody can do that. We're all free to speak and share and talk and discuss. It's just, if you're coming to this is how we're gonna vote and this is what we're gonna do, that's a completely different story, so. I'll give you a great example, not that it matters to you guys, it's just a good story. I was at a CDBG hearing meeting and the new governor had come into office and he wanted to take away some projects for 2 counties that definitely didn't vote for him. And so the board was saying, no, we can't do this, we can't meet outside of the board, it's been publicly noticed, so the chief of staff told the chair something, the chair recessed, and then sure enough, the chief of staff of the governor's office was pulling individuals in one by one. It was like blatant collusion, but it was just really scary to see, oh, this is dirty politics at play, and pulled in every board member and said, if you don't vote for us, your community's not gonna get funding next time. And, you know, that's essentially what was told to each board member, so. Obviously, the vote came out the way they wanted it to. But that's a definite example of collusion violation.
And there are a lot of people that, I can't say a lot of
Not in
people, but-
Alaska.
Not in Alaska, but there
Not in
are,
Alaska.
you always hear stories about how people get things done, and they don't always get things done on the upper side of the gray, above the gray line. So you want to be cautious of what you're doing because of what you're in the public eye and what people, and we're a very small community, and unfortunately, everybody knows everything, it seems like, and things do come around.
Our rule of thumb, when I used to train county commissioners, was you have to testify in court, how's it gonna sound? If somebody quizzes you, just think of yourself sitting on the stand and having to testify to your opinion. That usually tells you, oh, I don't wanna say that.
Your time to speak and discuss things is at the table after your meetings have been noticed and you're on and you have a lot of time to do that. I mean. That's pretty much all I have.
Run into each other at Walmart.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean you can't talk to each other. And like you said, you go to the library, you all go to the library. Checking out books or whatever you're doing, but it doesn't mean you're talking.
Which is what we want our.
Yeah.
The library.
That's why you're on the board. Because you use the library and you like our library and you are concerned about what goes on in our life, but also for your kids, you take everybody, I mean, I don't know if everybody goes, but it's a beautiful place to go, that's for sure.
Okay, you are done?
I'm done.
Okay, Pat, you're up next.
Okay. See, so do you want to bring up my slides? The last little presentation.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so I haven't done this before, but I don't know why I haven't done this before. So just want to give you a little introduction to the public library, not just our public library, but public libraries. So libraries have been around for thousands of years, but the modern public library developed in the United States in the 1800s.
Miss Pat?
Hmm?
Miss Pat?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but if there was a slide presentation, I'm not seeing it on this end.
Oh my gosh.
Does he have his video on? Because he should be.
Yeah, I was able to see the other two.
Oh, weird. Let's see. So Demiller's.
I was
I mean,
also
sound-
finding this yet.
Sometimes Demel, you have to close it all the way.
And open it. Okay. I don't have any pretty pictures. So,
Can you see that, Grant?
Yep, it came up. Thank you.
yeah. Okay. All right. So, many libraries, many public libraries, including our own library here in Ketchikan, were established by local women's literary and service groups with the aim of providing books, newspapers, and other reading material to the people of their communities. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, over 1,600 public library buildings were built, funded by industrialist and philanthropist Andrew Carnegie. Next slide. Oh boy, that's way too small. The Ketchikan Public Library is not a Carnegie library. There were no Carnegie libraries built in Alaska, but its origins are similar to those of other U.S. public libraries. It was established just a year after Ketchikan was incorporated as a city, when Harriet Hunt and the Ladies Literary Club worked with the city to establish the library. And the library has moved several times in the past 123 years and has been in its current building on Copper Ridge Lane since 2013. For many decades, the Ketchikan Public Library was the city's library, and borough residents who lived outside the city had to pay an annual fee to use it. In October 1985, residents of the borough approved a non-area-wide tax for library services, enabling all borough residents within and outside the city to sign up for a library account without an additional charge. Next slide. So a few basics about the library in the year just passed. The library has 3 professional staff who have a master's degree in library science. We also have 8 full and part-time regular staff who do not have the master's in library science. And we have 4 library pages who work for a few hours each week shelving books and straightening shelves. The number of our physical items that were checked out in 2023 is a little over 100,000. That's up from the previous year, which was about 94,000, but it's still down from 2019, which was the last year before the pandemic, by about a third. The number of electronic books that were checked out in 2023 has slightly increased by about 1,000 over 2019. Now, the library's visitor count includes permanent and seasonal residents, as well as cruise ship visitors in the summer. The library averaged 1 to 2 tours a day during the 2023 season, as well as people who actually walked up the hill and just to get some free Wi-Fi. The library's public computers continue to be used heavily, often, as Delilah said, to apply for jobs and to sign up for benefits, as well as just checking email and researching things online. Many employers and benefit providers require people to apply online now, which is a hardship for people that don't have a computer at home. And the 2-step authentication is even more difficult. And often we will use our own phones to be the second part of that 2-part authentication so that people can actually submit their applications. The library has programs for all ages, from babies to elders. And if people can't come to us, we come to them. Rebecca Brown is our outreach librarian, and she provides library materials and programs to people in local senior centers and facilities, as well as the Ketchikan Correctional Center, PATH, and the First City Homeless Shelter. Next slide. So I want to end by talking a little bit about the American Library Association, or the ALA, which is the professional organization of librarians and library workers in the United States. In the late 19th century, just as public libraries were starting to be established in the US, the ALA got started to support and educate those first generations of library workers. Many public libraries were and are very small, with either a single staff member or just a few. And the ALA provides training, connection, and support to these and other library workers across the country. Next slide. So starting in the late 1930s, the ALA has developed a series of policies and guidelines for librarians and libraries to use in their work. I've included the latest versions of 3 ALA documents in your packet and in the back. The Code of Ethics are a set of principles for professional librarians. The Library Bill of Rights was originally developed by a librarian in Illinois in 1938 to outline what library users have a right to expect from their community library. And the Freedom to Read Statement was developed in the 1950s during the McCarthy era to further delineate the library's responsibility to provide library users with a variety of materials that they would find useful, entertaining, and enlightening. So that's it. That's all from me. Any questions?
No, I've asked this before, but is there a way that the ALA can get us what changes were made? Because I know there's several that I've seen that were.
I mean, changes in each.
Yeah, like there was one in 2019, since that's internet era,
Mm-hmm.
you can find that. I'm just interested in knowing what changes and how it's
evolved.
evolved. Yeah, that's
Yeah. Not that I've been able to find, because I've looked. So I've been able to find some versions, but not all versions of these documents.
So they don't
No.
have a
They
library
don't
of
have an
what-
archive.
Thank you. So now we move on to organizational matters. So we can streamline our meetings and use our time as effectively as possible. The first item, I think the city attorney has spoken on that. The process for calling a special meeting, and evidently the chair, and when I say the chair, I will not be the chair much longer. So whatever we decide what the chair does or doesn't do, that will affect whoever is the next chair. And the city attorney made it very clear that that decision is made by the chair. And it would not have been appropriate for me to solicit input on that. So any discussion on that issue?
On what issue?
Calling a special meeting.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry, there was a lot of chair talk.
Right. Right. I think the thing is, if I were to make the decision about a special meeting, I would want to know, why do we have to have a meeting before our next scheduled meeting? That would be the number one question that I would ask. So any further comment on that? The Open Meeting Act, board motions and voting through email. And of course, once again, Mr. Seaver spoke to that issue. And I think we've now been schooled in how we deal with emails and how those are handled. And certainly, I looked at Pat to be the communications hub. Yes. Authority and capacity of Borough Assembly and City Board representatives from the January 10th meeting. Who would like to speak to that?
I'm trying to get back to my agenda.
See.
Authority and capacity of Borough Assembly and City Board representatives.
Yeah, and I think the issue was, at one point, the Borough Assembly was considering that the Borough Assembly representative on boards would not have voting capacities. And then that was shot down, I believe. And the thing is that that wouldn't be a decision that we would make at this body. We're governed by the municipal code, which speaks to that.
Yeah, we would probably have to read.
Oh, I was just gonna add to that if I could, because I think that the concern was that I heard is that if they made the appointee a non-voting member, then you have an even number. Then you have 8 voting members, and so policy would have to change on this board's side, because you don't want a board that has an equal number of voting members, and if you have a split decision.
Well, if the Borough Assembly person did not vote, would that also hold for the city representative?
It doesn't, it doesn't mandate it automatically, but that was also part of the conversation about repercussions or implications of making that switch.
Right. Yeah, but then, of course, it's written one way in our city code, so the Borough Assembly would have to dealing with the city code.
Yeah, when you pull this lever, this thing sticks out, and how do you put it all back together?
Yeah, and for example, our high school representative is a voting member of this body. I understand for the school board, high school representative, that is not a voting person. So we're a little different. So everybody gets to vote.
So right now it's at 8.
Correct.
No, we have 9 members, they all vote.
And the chair votes as well?
I vote if there's a tie. And if you go into Robert Rules of Orders, there's other times where the chair might vote. For example, let's say there were 4 votes for, 3 votes against. If the chair voted against, then it would be a tie and the motion would not move forward. So there are times that the chair could vote.
And where's that policy available?
Is it what?
Where's that policy available?
In Robert's Rules of Order. If we
I can
don't,
look up the reference.
yeah, if we don't have a way of doing things, then we look to Robert's Rules of Orders and try to figure
So,
out what he means.
I guess my question is, you said there are times when the chair would vote,
Mhm,
and you gave an example of 4 to 3.
mhm.
Why would the chair vote in that situation?
The chair would vote, if they choose to do so, vote with the 3, so it would be 4 to 4, it would be a tie, and it wouldn't move forward. So in effect, it would fail.
So I'm still not clear, because I thought that as an exception to when the chair votes is when there's a tie.
Mhm.
So in the example you gave, it's not a tie.
Yeah.
It's 4 to 3.
It's also
So-
in Robert's Rules of Order.
So what triggers the chair's ability to vote? They just feel like it?
Well, I used to vote. I did not know that that was not the thing to do. Although if you read Robert's Rules of Orders extensively, in some cases, the chair does vote. So,
But the code doesn't say that you don't vote.
no, it doesn't.
But in our code for the mayor, it specifically says the mayor does not vote
Yeah.
and he only votes in the case of a tie.
Mhm.
But the city code does not say the chair
Yeah.
cannot vote.
It says 9 voting members.
Yeah.
I understand.
That'd be something I'd like to get some clarification on.
Okay, okay.
That one down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But definitely ask.
You know,
Yeah.
it might be worth looking at. I've been comfortable in the last year not voting. But another chair might feel differently. So it probably would be a good thing to clarify.
And I think in keeping with the notion of having clarity across the board for all of the advisory boards, it'd be nice if that was written out and
Yeah.
codified in plain language so that whomever is in that
Exactly.
seat
Mhm.
has something to operate by.
I know with one of my past boards, they had a 5-member board and they actually at the beginning of the year as a board adopted that the chair would vote. So it was a board decision to say, we understand Robert's rules, but we are adopting a process wherein the chair votes. So I think that, I'll double check with Mitch, but I think that's the clarification. You as a board, since it's not spoken to in the code, can decide, you know, when you start your meeting, an organizational meeting, and maybe at your next meeting, if you want it as an agenda topic, to just make the decision of whether or not the chair votes.
Right. So if you're looking at establishing vice chairs for the various advisory boards, you might look at that issue also.
Yeah, that's not in the code either.
It doesn't say a lot about our officers in the municipal code.
We'll clarify that.
Question about the capacity, and I'll ask you, when we have representatives on the board who are here at the direction of another board or another entity, what is their, are they serving as individuals or are they serving on behalf of the board? I know for borough, I actually don't know about city, so I'm curious.
Well, Charlie, you made a comment last meeting to clarify. Would you like to state that again?
I can. I have it
Yes,
written down.
you have it.
I do.
And is this your own personal feeling or is this something that came from the Borough Assembly?
I'm following the policy. I am appointed by the mayor, but I am stating my own personal.
I will say from the city council perspective, unless the council has given a directive, they will not give the directive to Councilor Finnegan to bring to the board. They'll give the directive to me. And I do that through Pat and the chair. So if the council has a directive, they will make it as a majority to the staff. So Councilor Finnegan is the representative as required by the code, by the Ketchikan Municipal Code, but he is not speaking on behalf of the council because it's part of our code of ethics that I will not use my power as a council member to make those decisions. So, and anything that the city council is directed by majority vote. So he is appointed in the capacity as the mayor's selection to fill the spot as the city council's allotted spot through the code. So he's allowed as the mayor to appoint one council member. But that council member's actions on this board are definitely to their individual perspective and input as a member of the community. So the mayor, just as he selected all of you for your diverse and individual input, even though you're from the Friends of the Library, from the City Council, from the Assembly, you do not represent the group. You're the person in the community that fills that role. So in all capacity, on the City Council's, I can speak to clearly, any actions are your own personal input as a board member.
And
Jack?
Charlie, if you don't mind, while you're searching for
Please.
that language, if I can speak to the manager's comments there. When this matter was before the Borough Assembly, I anticipated that a similar conversation may come before the council, and so I sought input from City Attorney Mitch Seaver. My approach to him, and I don't have his email with me, so I can't quote him precisely, I'll just have to kind of paraphrase. My expression to him was aligned with what Manager Walsh has just said, and the language that I used was that I viewed my work on this advisory board as being like a committee with respect to my representation of the council on this body. And again, I'm paraphrasing here, but he was in agreement with that. He didn't think it was necessary because both you at a library advisory board meeting and I also serve the Ketchikan Campus Advisory Council. Assembly member Jeremy Bynum serves on that council, and he'd used similar language at a meeting there. And so I'd asked Mitch about the necessity for me to use similar language to identify this as being personal representation and not council representation. And Mitch said it was optional but not required or expected. So
At the last meeting, I stated that while I am appointed to the body by the borough mayor, all statements and opinions I offer to this board now and going forward are mine and mine only, and not intended to express positions held by the Borough Assembly or the borough as a whole.
Does that answer your question?
Kinda, yeah, eh, to, okay. To the statement made, if that's the case, if it's optional, is when a city representative is here, is there any connection between the role of a city representative, or city council? I'm not even sure I'm gonna say this right. Hers is very clear. The borough's statement is very clear, and they also make that, the borough, when they make their appointments, make that very clear. Since it isn't made clear, or it is considered optional by the city attorney, where's the line?
I can answer that. Making the statement is optional because there is no representation in code or through the appointment that any council member serving on this board in the assigned position represents the city council. So, and that was Mitch's statement, is it's optional. If you want to make that statement, you can, but it's not necessary because there is no implied intent that a council member represents the council.
I have heard multiple residents under that impression. Is there a way we can make that clear?
I think if anybody has a question, if they want to direct it, just let me know and we can make that clear. I'm not sure how to. It's
So they've
already
made
there.
statements to me,
Mhm.
so if I need to send them to you, then I will
Oh,
do
yeah,
that, if that's
absolutely.
what you'd like. I'm just wondering, is there a way for us to say, like the Borough Assembly did, hey guys, this is a divorced issue. Instead of that, I should send them to you?
I think so, because I
Okay.
don't know how to make it a public statement. I mean, it, just as the assembly and the borough, no one assembly member or council member can make a decision on behalf of the council. So it's just, that's how our government works.
Then I will send them to you. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
An idea.
Oh.
Oh, yes, Grant?
I, maybe.
Can you speak up?
To, sure, yeah, maybe to, if there are folks in the community that are looking for something to reference, I thought Ms. Walsh's statements were really concise and clear about the role of a city council member on this library advisory board. So maybe we could just direct folks once this is published to the timestamp of when Ms. Walsh outlines the role of the city council members. Like I said, I thought it was very clearly articulated, I thought, and should clear up any confusion.
Yes.
In Robert's Rules of Order, it does say that the chair's vote, when they vote, it will change the result of the vote. So if it's a majority and it's a tie, your vote either makes it pass or fail. But, so it does say that the chair normally doesn't vote, but it should be clarified in our code whether, because it is an advisory board, not an elected official where there's a mayor. There are some different guidelines. So that'll be a decision from your board, is if you want your chair to vote or not. When our our mayor is absent and our vice mayor takes the seat, he still votes, or she, as a council member. Just because she becomes the chair to run the meeting because the mayor is absent doesn't mean she can't vote anymore. So there are some different types of rules there, and I can see where, so it says the vote by ballot, which would be when you vote, or when the chair's vote will change the result of the vote. So if there's a majority and there fails because there's a tie, therefore the chair would vote to tie. So it'll kind of be how we define this in the code. In reference to the council members' appointments to the boards, after the election, each mayor will appoint to all the boards, the museum board, the advisory, Port Harbor, the library board, there's planning, not the planning commission, but the, there's a number of boards. Those boards then come to the council and normally there aren't any objections, but there aren't any rules to just the library, you know, unless it's gonna be stated in all of these, what that role is. That was a decision made by the borough mayor for his appointment to this seat on what they can and cannot do. And that's some, you know, as far as you voting or not voting, that had nothing to do with our city appointment.
That wasn't a decision by the mayor, that
No,
was
that's
just
what-
the assembly.
Right, no, I know, but he originally, didn't he come to the assembly saying that he didn't want the library appointment to be a voting member of the board?
He moved forward a resolution to clarify the role of the borough
Right.
assembly, to clarify whether or not they were speaking for themselves or for
Okay.
the
All
assembly.
right, I just didn't
Yeah.
know exactly what,
Yeah.
what that was, but it's, and so what Delilah, you were talking about is clarifying the position of the city council role on all of our boards then.
No, that's already clear.
Okay,
It's already clear that individuals don't speak for the council. And
correct,
that's in our code, it's in
Right.
our code of ethics.
okay,
It's very established.
okay.
I think same for the borough.
If I may, in the municipal code, you said that, after, Deborah asked, and you said that you couldn't really make a public statement about it, and I know you guys are planning on redoing the code. If possible, I mean, just in section B where it talks about the composition of the board members, you could just throw in a simple sentence right there that says everybody is on their own behalf, and then that clears it up
Good idea.
for everyone, you know, going forward, you know, everybody that's appointed to the library is, you know, acting on their own regardless of who appointed them and what position they hold. Then there's no questions. It's in borough code
It's a
or
great
city
suggestion.
code, and
We can point to something directly.
just my 2 cents.
Okay, any further discussion on that? Proposing agenda items. Pat, would you like to speak to this one?
Sure. The form that's in your packet is based on a form that the council uses, and I'm not sure whether the council uses this all the time or just in certain circumstances, to request that an agenda item be placed on a library advisory board agenda. And so I've got this draft form, and I thought I would just bring it up and for board consideration,
Okay.
whether it's necessary or if it is necessary, what changes need to be made.
Any comments about this? Would it be helpful?
Thank you. Thank you. I just really like how in the beginning, it says clearly that it needs to be submitted 10 calendar days before the quarterly meeting. But you need to give an extra 10 days if you are requiring legal review. I would love an example of when you would want or need legal review. Or like, because in my experience, sometimes you can have a conversation with staff and you can hone in on what you want your resolution to say that makes sense. And so I'm just wondering if there could be some guidance on that, because we don't want to be wasting resources. We want to be efficient and good
Yeah.
use of our time. So
Yeah, I can think of a recent thing, and I'm not quite sure the chronology, but the issue was how many of us can meet in, you know, outside of a board meeting to discuss, I believe the issue was some wording, some suggested wording, and that required legal involvement.
And now that you say that,
Mhm.
yes, brain finally clicked. The two was when we were talking about subcommittees. If a subcommittee, when would it be a quorum? And that's where the
Oh,
two
right,
came
right,
in.
right.
So it was the 3 was for the advisory board meeting. That's where the 3 is. The 2 was the subcommittee discussion. So I apologize, that's where I got my wires crossed, but that would be an example of a legal review. We wanted to have a clarification of what's considered a quorum, and we do have a subcommittee to work on a policy separately. And that's not bad. Having a subcommittee of two or three or four is absolutely fine as long as we notice it properly.
Okay, so subcommittee can
The
be 3 or 4.
subcommittee is, quorum is considered two, or you have to notice it. If you have 2 or more participating in a subcommittee, you do have to notice it as public.
Oh, really?
Okay. So if you decide, us as the lab, we want to have a subcommittee to work on the collection development policy,
Mhm.
if we have 2 or more people on that subcommittee, it has to be noticed to the public. So,
And minutes have to be taken?
I believe so, we would follow.
That's-
That, minutes I'll have to check, but I'm not sure. But, so for the lab, the quorum, you guys were right, it's 3, or majority when you get for public meetings and noticing, it's 3. It was the subcommittee where. But that was an example of what, we had to ask the attorney, what's considered okay for a subcommittee.
Mhm.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Do you ever get suggestions for agenda items and it's kind of vague? And this would help specify? something?
Right, and it might help the requester kind of solidify what they were asking and what the issue was.
Mhm.
So,
Now, currently you request agenda items before the meeting.
generally, yes, or go to the list of future agenda items that are
Yeah.
brought up at the end of each meeting.
And this would give you 10 calendar days. So that would give you adequate time to get the agenda out.
Right.
And what's beneficial about this form is that you can work with Pat to develop it. You may not know what your recommended motion should be or how it should be worded. So you can sit with Pat and say, I want the board to decide X, or I want the board to discuss Y, and be very explicit about that, because that will be the motion that comes forward. Is I move the board discuss X, or I move we take action on Y. I recommend we are gonna give a recommendation to the library that says this. So it's very specific, and I know that's very helpful to keep the meeting going, because we all know what we're debating and what we're discussing. You go start with a good recommended motion.
Well, otherwise it's up to the person that's putting it on the agenda of what that interpretation is. And this way, it's very straightforward of what that person
Right.
wants as a result of their request.
If you tell me I want to discuss cats and dogs, the motion's going to be, we move to discuss cats and dogs. But it doesn't mean you're going to really achieve anything other than a discussion.
Well, I
But
think,
if I really want you to say, I want us to decide if dogs are allowed in the library, that's the actual motion. It's not, I just want to talk about it. It's what are we going to recommend as policy?
well, I think for a board member to get the agenda, say a week ahead of time, and it says cats and dogs, you
What
don't,
does that mean?
yeah, how can you think ahead about what that might mean or,
Or what they mean. 'Cause Pat doesn't.
Yes.
What is the policy for how many advisor amendments you can request for a meeting?
I mean, agenda
What
items.
you thinking?
Well, we don't currently have one.
Is it gonna be concurrent to the other advisory boards or the council amount? Like how many representatives can?
It's interesting, like the city council, when it comes to the business of the city, we have huge agendas. A lot of it's on our consent agenda, but there are 20 items on Thursday's consent, I think. Yeah, almost 20 items on the consent agenda, plus the 5 new business items and 15 discussion items. So to do the business of the city, it's very involved. I know the council has themselves limited to only up to 4 future agenda items because of just the burden it puts on staff. They don't always name 4 at every council meeting, and they've agreed as a body when we did our training with them that they would make sure that not one council member is monopolizing all staff time, that they're giving each other equal representation, but they've agreed amongst themselves that 2 is a lot and 4 is a maximum, and they just agreed as a body. So there's no rule, it's just that's how their body wants to function.
So that might be something that you want to put on your agenda of how many agenda items that each person could put on, or you put a limit if you want. If you don't, you don't have to. It'd be a guideline of what you guys decide.
Do we want it on the agenda for April?
I make a motion to discuss how many agenda items can be added.
Is there a second
Second.
discussion?
My personal feeling is that we all have to sit through these meetings. So I would be hesitant to limit anybody's right or ability to bring something forward. I would anticipate that my fellow board members are prudent and thoughtful in what their action they're putting forward to take. So if we want to talk about it again the next month, you know, that's the will of the board, but I would say just see if it becomes an issue because we have a beautiful new form now.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is nice.
Okay, there is a motion on the floor to discuss this at April. Is there further discussion? All in favor? Oh, excuse me. Pat, do you want to call roll?
I would love to call a roll.
We're trying to make it easier for Pat to write down.
Yes, to keep minutes and keep who says what.
Okay.
Let's see, on the motion to add an agenda item for how many motions can be proposed by a single board member.
Or how many agenda items?
How many agenda items, sorry. Let's see, I'm going to ask everybody for their vote. Arnson?
No.
Nope, okay. Echo Hawk?
Yes.
Finnegan?
Yes.
See, we don't have Kate here. Hops?
Yes.
Let's see. Sherry?
No.
Nope. Okay. See, Sophia?
Yes.
Okay. And Simon? Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 in favor, 3 opposed.
So motion carries. So that will be on the agenda for next month. Do we want to have a motion to make this form mandatory or optional? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I think, if I may, sorry.
Yes, you may.
I think there's some things that are pretty cut and dry, and I think it should be optional. I mean, you can easily email Pat and say, hey, I want to put this on the agenda, and she's like, all right, got it. And that saves paperwork and time. But if she has any questions, she could, say, I'm not quite sure what you're asking. Could you please fill out this form?
So
think
you
that
want to
would
make a
be-
motion?
I move that this be optional.
Is there a
Okay.
second?
Second.
Okay, discussion? Okay, all in favor of this form being adopted as optional?
Are we calling
Pardon me?
roll?
Oh, in the room.
Old habits die hard, Jack.
I understand.
I have a lot of old habits.
Pat. Okay. Let's see. So I will start with Echo Hawk.
Yes.
Finnegan.
Yes.
See, Nima.
Yes.
Yes. See, Sherry.
Yes.
Yes. Sophia. Sophia?
I think that was a yes.
Okay. And Deborah. Okay. All right, so that passes. So we've now voted to make optional this form.
I don't think you got all.
Oh, I'm so sorry. See, I forgot to go back up to the top. Okay.
It's a yes.
All right, okay, okay.
So.
Yeah.
We'll get better at this.
Wow.
Chair, so do you want us to put in the code that you're doing a roll call vote, or do you want to, is that something that, because that's not in here either, I mean.
Oh, I was gonna say, it's on the,
It's
it's on the
H,
agenda,
so,
yes.
oh,
It just makes it so much easier.
Yes, I know. I was just adopting the role. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, and especially in the minutes when you specify who voted which way.
Mm,
But our
Yeah.
code specifically says I do a roll call vote.
mm.
So
Oh,
I just
okay.
wanted, we
Yeah.
can put that in the code as well
Yeah.
then. And we're gonna do this straight across the board for all of them.
Cool.
So everybody's the same, but it'd be nice to know. When the next board comes into play, do we do
Mhm.
roll call? Do we just
Yeah.
all in favor? I mean, is
Yeah.
it a majority? Is it a 2/3?
Yeah.
Well, I can hardly wait to see the new codes.
I know.
Me too.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, limiting the duration of meetings. Since our last two meetings were right in the neighborhood of 4 hours, hopefully this training will speed things up a bit. But how does the group feel about limiting the time that we spend on our meetings? Deborah?
If we're meeting 4 times a year, our agendas very well may be large. So I think we'd have to balance that with limiting. Otherwise, we could easily be having a meeting that continues throughout the year if we're only meeting 4 times. I mean, I would assume we're not just putting things on the agenda because we want to sit here.
Yeah.
So we're doing it on purpose because it needs to be taken care of, whereas other bodies are gonna meet more frequently. If we're not gonna meet that frequently, that might be an issue.
Of course, we meet those 4 times a year because it's in the city code. Do all of the advisory boards meet quarterly?
No, and the library used to meet monthly. You guys, we changed, somebody requested.
It was before my time, but it wasn't long before my time.
Yeah, it was changed to quarterly. It used to be monthly. Port and Harvest meets monthly. And museum, did they meet?
I think it's every 2 months
Every two?
Mm.
or every quarter. They're not as often, but the FAB meets every month.
Yeah,
What does the code say? Does it say we,
The code says you will meet the
Quarterly.
4 months outlined in the code, but you can also meet at the will of the chair. So you could meet monthly if that's what you decide is important.
oh, it doesn't require that it's,
It
Okay.
only requires you meet those 4 times a year,
okay.
but you can meet more than that.
Yes, Charlotte?
Thank you. My thought could I agree with Deborah that if we have agenda items, they're important and they should be addressed. I also recognize that we are volunteers and I know that, I'm not sure what the city regulations are, but for us, I believe it requires a vote of the board members present for us to continue past 10 p.m. And I think that there's a mandatory, you can't go past 10:30 or so.
And you're speaking of the borough.
I'm
assembly.
talking about the assembly board. And so in an effort to address, we need to be efficient, but we also need to cover all of the important issues. I think it would be a good idea when we talk about the code to outline what happens if we can't get through an agenda in a reasonable amount of time, which to me would be 10 p.m.
Well,
if
we
we're-
start at 6, not 7.
no, the birth.
No,
We
we
start
start
at
at
5:30.
We
5:30.
start at 5.
Yeah. So
I'm glad you get paid.
yeah. So
Um,
that would be maybe what I would suggest, and I don't know if it's appropriate to make a motion about that.
I'd kind of like to hear would you rather meet more often or would you rather meet like 4 or 5 hours and then call it quits or whatever? How do people feel about that?
Madam Chair,
Yes,
can you all hear me okay?
you could talk a little louder.
I don't necessarily disagree with the comments made. I think the only variable that I think is relevant is that the Borough Assembly is reviewing a variety of different items from a variety of different departments encompassing business throughout the entire island. So the Library Advisory Board, in magnitude of work is considerably less. Now, I do appreciate that we only meet quarterly, but I do think that that it's not quite apples to apples. And so I would say that 9 o'clock is I would say that it would be more reasonable at the top end for a meeting that starts at 6, considering, as we've already mentioned, this is a volunteer body. So that's my input.
Okay.
I think 4 hours. I mean, I've only been to a couple meetings now and they've all lasted 4 hours. But at the end of the day, except for, a few items that we're covering this evening, obviously needed its own meeting, and was not going to happen at our last meeting. I think, in the interest of just getting stuff done, I have a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old. My husband's schedule varies. He drives the airport ferry. So sometimes, he's still working when we get out of here at 10 o'clock at night. It's 10 o'clock is like, the last, everybody should be at home in bed, especially on a Wednesday. Maybe what?
Tuesday.
Well, Tuesday, our
Tuesday
normal.
special.
Normally Wednesday.
So, I think, we could come up with something that is, at 9 o'clock. Like Grant's saying, we're all volunteers, but if there's only 2 things left on the agenda, we're not going home at 9 because we don't want to have to meet again or drag it on into the future. But there's, we could maybe take a little minute at 9 o'clock and say, hey, we could vote. Do we finish it? And, we're done by 10, absolutely done by 10. Or do we have so much stuff left that we're going to have to do a special meeting whenever the chair decides to finish it, something like that, I think. But I don't know. That's just my 2 cents. I'm not making any motions, but that's how I feel.
Jack?
Yeah, if I may weigh in on the same, I'm rather in agreement with Sherry on this, in part because we already have a mechanism in place. If a meeting is dragging on, or if it's gotten to a later hour, we have the option, and we actually employed this option in our last meeting to say, okay, it's late, we've been here for a while, we're all getting tired, we're not having productive conversation. Why don't we postpone this for either the next meeting or have a special meeting, for one. And 2, I don't want to disregard, because it's easy right now, just amongst the group itself, to forget about the fact that sometimes public comment and correspondence can take upwards of 45 minutes, an hour, or even longer. And so if we meet at 6 and we hear from the public, we hear correspondence, and that takes us through the first hour and a quarter of the slated meeting time that we've got, that gives us very little time to act on the agenda that might be before us. So I'd be more inclined to be respectful of people's time. We are volunteers on this board, and to do what we can, move through the agenda, not with haste, but brevity where it's achievable. And if we get to a point where the hour's worn on, or we're all beginning to flag, then we exercise the option to end the meeting or agree that, all right, we're going to give this another 30 minutes and then we'll call it a night and meet again in the future. Those are my 2 cents.
Anybody else?
Would it be a possibility, because I'm from back in the day when this was like an hour, where my kids could play on the floor for the entire time they were sitting outside, and they're here every single meeting. If we do have public comment and it goes for like an hour, can we, when we recess after the public comment, make a stop point in the agenda and just plan to carry on to the next day? Because or the next following week, we talked about splitting up the agenda into two meetings so we can get through that agenda and not have to wait another quarter.
So if I understand you, we've gone through the business at the beginning, we've had public comment, and it's like.
And say we have a public comment that's like one person and we go through and then proceed as usual. But if we have public comment that goes 45 minutes, an hour, it's a significant portion of our meeting. At that recess point, can we come back and say, hey, we're going to get through only item 4, and then we're going to come back tomorrow or the following week and continue this agenda. And then that way it doesn't become a whole quarter before we finish our business.
So that would be your preference?
I'm asking if that could be an option or if anyone sees that as being a way to tackle this.
Charlie?
Thank you, Your Honor. I think that that would bump up into Open Meetings Act stuff because we can't just have another meeting the next day because there's a required notice time.
Okay.
This is
Next
big.
week, next week, is that enough time?
I'd have to
Oh.
ask Kim.
Yeah, I know, I'm looking at that because there is a postpone to a certain time and there's also commit to refer. So let me get back to you on that. And why you're
Yeah.
Make sure.
talking here, because you do have to give reasonable notice, but I know you're not gonna be able to do it the next day.
Okay.
But a lot of times you can either, well, for sure, you can always put it to your next, but there is an actual motion to refer and defer to certain time. So let me get that and
I'll go ahead and make a motion then.
I just wanted to ask you one thing. At the Borough Assembly, if you decide you, at 10:30, you're not done, what happens then?
I haven't been in that experience yet. I'm still a little new. I know that there is an effort to try to get the business done that's on the agenda. But what has to happen is my understanding, and maybe staff can help me with this, is there has to be a motion to adjourn the meeting to a date certain. You cannot just say, we're gonna take this up whenever we feel like it.
Right.
So there has to be, and like when I was on the planning commission, we had a second meeting date that we could always use because we always met the first Tuesday of the month. But if there was something that needed more information or we had to postpone it, but it was detrimental to the applicant, for example, to wait an entire month, there is a holding place for meeting the 4th Tuesday of the month that we could always call upon. And so maybe that's the option, because I'm with Nina on the we need to be efficient and respectful and not drag this on for hours, but we still need to tackle the business. And so maybe instead of going to a different meeting schedule or reverting back to a monthly schedule, keep it on the quarterly, but have a holding place,
Have an if game.
for
Yeah.
for a second meeting if needed, or a special meeting. And it's just on the calendar, and we don't have to question, you know, oh, when are you available? When are you available? When are you available? It's like, nope, okay, if we can't finish it tonight, we know on the 3rd Wednesday of next month, we'll be back here again to tackle the rest of this. That would be my thought, would be
Grant, as a member of the Borough Assembly, how, have you ever had meetings go beyond 10:30?
In that role, I think I've had one go right up to 11. And Charlene's correct. It takes a motion to extend it past 10, but then it takes a super majority to extend it past 10:30.
Okay.
And then if it's not, and the business isn't completed by 11, basically we're unable to go past 11. And if the business isn't completed, then the item gets, then another meeting is required and another meeting is called. But I do think also that, I think with the process, I haven't had a chance to, the new process with the, sorry, I'm drawing a blank over here. Adding an agenda item, the new process with adding an agenda item and adding that to the meetings. And I think all of us just being conscientious of everybody's time. I think that'll go a long way of just having us move forward a little bit faster. But I would prefer if at either a stop like Nina mentioned, to review where we're at, or at 9 o'clock, that's where we take the vote instead of 10 o'clock at the, that would be on the borough.
Okay, thank you.
I'd also like to add, the borough is adults. We have a teen member on our board who has school tomorrow.
That's true.
And as having a minor, 9 o'clock seems pretty late to have her parent have to come pick her up.
So the,
Okay.
oh, Sophia, okay. go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes, Sophia?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, could you speak loudly, please?
Okay. Just want to make a comment. I mean,
I can't hear her at all.
So-
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Sophia, you're breaking up. We can't really hear you.
And Sophia and DeMello, actually, we just had a quick discussion. It's absolutely possible if you would like to type in your comments to the chat and we could read them out.
Yes, did you hear that, Sophia?
Grant just suggested it too.
Yep.
Sophia, can you type in your comment?
School's canceled tomorrow.
Wasn't?
Yeah,
Because the
Oh,
snow
for the snow,
advisory.
because of the snow,
Supposed to
yeah.
start getting snowing.
Oh.
All KG at
Forecast.
VSD schools will be closed tomorrow.
So the motion you guys are talking about is postponed to a certain time, but usually you're on a particular motion that's already been moved and seconded and your discussion and somebody moves to postpone to a certain time. That particular item would be moved to the next meeting or, but I'm trying to find the exact motion to actually postpone the entire
The
meeting
rest of the agenda.
to, but having
To
a
adjourn.
fallback, yeah, to adjourn until, because a lot of, adjourn to, it's not to a certain, it's not just a motion, you wanna adjourn at a certain time
Yeah.
and retake up that meeting. Because you've already noticed your meeting, it's just
Yeah.
the date's now gonna be a different.
Right, right.
Could I make a motion that, just in the interest of time this
Well-
evening?
Actually, Charlie already asked to make a motion,
Oh,
but we're trying to hear from Sophia. Are you
Oh,
there,
gotcha.
Sophia?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, we'd like to hear your comment.
I rejoined the meeting. Something was just not right, but I did just want to make a note that I am 15. I cannot have my license quite yet. So I do rely on my mom or dad giving me a ride home from meetings. And I know that it's a huge, they're a huge help giving me rides, but it is a little difficult for them because I do have two younger brothers at home who, when my mom has to come pick me up from a meeting at 10 o'clock or so, it can be much
Okay,
I have-
duly noted.
Oh, you're breaking up again.
Okay, you're breaking
So
up again.
I think you got the gist of it, that it's
Yes.
difficult to go that late.
Yes.
Truly. So Charlie, you wanted to make a motion?
I would make a motion that I would move to limit meetings to 3 hours with option to continue a meeting by a vote of the majority of the board, not ever to exceed 10 PM.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
For discussion.
Yes.
Okay, discussion?
That doesn't help.
Could we make a friendly amendment?
No, just make an amendment. That
Oh.
would be my suggestion.
Well, I just like what you said earlier about having the preset if date for the second
Yeah.
meeting if we do have to go. I would like you to include that in your, what?
Split it. Make
Um,
that motion also.
For clarification, what Charlie said was 3 hours and we would vote whether we want to continue to 10. Are you saying then also we would be voting if we want to meet a second night?
If necessary, yes, but if there is a second night, I would like to have that second night pre-scheduled along with, just how our 4 meetings say the third, whatever Wednesday every quarter. The if meeting would be the, you know,
Fourth
the
Wednesday.
first
Yeah.
Wednesday of the following month, every, whatever it is,
Mhm.
something in there that, so there's no, having to email back and forth, who's gonna be in town, who's not, and then that way everybody just knows, like, if we go over, if we don't, get all of our ducks in a row before 9 o'clock on this night, we have to come back in 2 weeks and do it again on this night. That way it's just on the schedule and, it's set if there has to be a second meeting to finish the agenda from the original meeting.
Do you want to accept a friendly amendment?
No.
Is
I
there?
want us to take up these issues individually, and I think it will be more efficient. So
Okay.
if we deal with the timing issue and then make a motion to have a set holding place, it seems.
Okay, is there a
Instead of muddying
second?
the issue.
A second to Deborah's amendment?
Sure.
What? Sherry.
Sherry, excuse me. I'm having a hard time with you two guys.
That's fine. I'll withdraw my amendment.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if she wants to just talk about her motion first and then we can amend or add a second motion to.
No.
I won't make it an amendment. I will make another motion after she's done hers
Okay.
to do.
So we have a motion on the
Yeah.
floor that our meetings would be limited to 3 hours. However, with a vote of the majority, it would be extended to 10 PM. And we have a second on that. Discussion?
Extended up to not to exceed 10 p.m.
Mhm.
Any discussion? Deborah?
I wonder if a lot of this isn't addressed by the idea of we know we have a full agenda that includes, I don't know, what do we have? 4 different presentations, 2 different public hearings. We know that's coming or a huge, we're gonna review this entire policy to say specifically, Pat in the chair to say, this is gonna be really big. I think we need to move some chess pieces because there's just gonna be so much, there's gonna be public comment. This is an issue that people will speak on. It seems like that should also be a gatekeeper, so to speak, for the issue. Because I wonder, in the agendas that have gone over, and obviously there's no need to go look, but how many of those have been full of public hearings, large chunks of tasks to tackle. So I understand going through all of this and finding where all the speed bumps and where do we put the gates. I think some of it has been just that we have such large agendas with a big mouthful. And honestly, I think it's appropriate to say that a lot of times we're here because the public needs to speak. And the issues that are being brought up, they want to speak to. And we don't want to limit that. Anyway.
Jack, do you have an opinion?
Oh, I've expressed mine. I'll be ready for the roll call.
Oh, okay. Let's see. I think everybody has had a chance to speak. Okay, are we ready for the motion?
Okay, so this is the motion to limit meetings to 3 hours with an option to continue if it's by majority vote, but not to exceed 10 p.m. So let's see, I will start with Nina.
Yes.
All right. Sherry.
Yes.
Yes. Sophia.
Yeah.
Yes. Deborah. Okay. Charlie.
Yes.
Okay. Grant.
Yes.
Yes. And Jack.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Motion passes.
Oh, hi. I would like to make a motion to schedule tentative if meeting dates 2 weeks out from our original meeting dates, like not the next Wednesday, but the Wednesday after. Is that good for everybody?
Leave enough time for-
What?
Does that leave enough
That's
time?
enough time for advertising.
Yeah. And have it on the schedule as if dates, I mean, I don't know how you want to word that, but just have it on the schedule. That way it's there and there's no question to when we have to finish, or when we are going to finish our unfinished agenda items.
Is there a-
Second.
Oh,
Thank
thank you. Discussion?
Is that something that we would do for all the boards? Because we're talking about standardizing.
That would just be for us.
Can I make a suggestion? Maybe in the motion to say whenever an agenda is distributed and its estimated discussion time will exceed 3 hours, a follow-up meeting automatically be scheduled 2 weeks from the original meeting date.
She said it better.
I had to type it out before I read it.
Sounds like a friendly amendment.
Yeah, that's what,
But that's a suggestion.
that's why I usually like write speeches before I come in here, is because my brain, I'm a morning person. This is way past my bedtime.
Clarification on that though, because it sounded like there has to be a decision by somebody, I'm not sure who.
Yeah, and that's why I left it at, if it's estimated that the discussion time might exceed the 3 hours, that we automatically.
But what if we do exceed 3 hours and that wasn't?
Oh, that's true.
Well, let's say we've gone 3 hours, there's a motion to continue until 10. But if the body knows that, oh, we could actually meet again in 2 weeks, let's go home at 9 o'clock. So it would affect that vote, don't you think?
Yes, but I'm just concerned.
So I like it phrasing and I'll have to type it again.
So there is a motion
But-
called
That's when you don't wanna
fix
make a
the
decision.
time to which to
Mhm.
adjourn. So you can set like at the beginning of your meetings, a time to which to adjourn. And,
How about
but
a
she's carrying over the
follow-up
meeting.
meeting is automatically scheduled 2 weeks from the original meeting date, and the board will decide if it's needed.
Yeah.
Cause I think that's what you were talking about with the planning commission. They do have 2 meetings a month, but they don't always use the second meeting. So it's scheduled, but you still would advertisers, I mean, when you look at the planning commission, apparently they meet twice a month. That's in their code, they meet twice a month.
So I like that phrasing, is a follow-up meeting automatically scheduled 2 weeks from the original meeting date, and then to be finalized by the board.
So,
So I think you need to keep an eye on the time, you know, cause if you're in the middle of a big discussion, you're either gonna end that and vote and move on and then carry the rest of your business over to the next meeting. So you need to be looking at your clock. I mean, if you wanna be up by 9 o'clock. Sometimes the chair can do that, like our chair will say,
You
okay,
guys, if you accept her
okay,
Yeah.
so you
change.
Yeah.
accept the change in
I
Jack?
agree to the change.
Okay. Pat, would you read it as it's now written?
Sure. See, the motion is to schedule a follow-up meeting automatically to occur 2 weeks after the original date, if it is, the board decides it's needed.
Discussion?
Can I ask what would happen if there weren't a quorum available for that follow-up meeting?
We wouldn't have a meeting?
Is there any need to continue to put that into language? Does it automatically just go over to the next meeting then? Or is it dropped?
Yeah, if you don't have a quorum, you don't have a meeting, so your agenda would roll over to your next scheduled meeting.
Charlotte?
So in the stuff I read, it said that if we don't have a quorum, then the business that we are to conduct is to not do any business except to establish the next meeting day, date, and time. So I think that there's already a policy that would answer that excellent question that, and I would expect that if there wasn't a quorum for that second meeting, those that were available and present would set a new day, date, and time for the follow-up meeting, because that's what the policy says. I would not expect that we would wait until the next business meeting.
Or the members of the board who are, well, let's see, that would get into more business. Never mind. Yeah.
Because that's what's already on the,
Mhm.
in what, somewhere I read that.
Where is that? Sorry, I missed that. Then I shouldn't have answered the question, asked the question.
No, it's a
I'm
great
afraid.
question.
In the municipal code, I
Yeah, it's
believe.
in the code
Okay.
Somewhere.
about.
If there's not a quorum.
It's in the actual code.
Mhm.
5
Okay.
members of the board shall constitute a quorum for the transaction of business. Actions of the board are taken by a vote of not less than 4 members, blah, 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 blah. Which quorum is present, they. Sooner feeling, I need glasses, I'm sorry. It might be farther than that.
Not a whole lot. But it is
I
in
read
there.
it.
I read it.
Robert
I know, I read it too.
Somewhere. Maybe it is in Robert's rules.
Do we have?
I feel like it's in Robert's rules. But I read it in the policy record.
Everybody on the hunt.
Here we go, it's right. Thing, I think, if I could, Your Honor.
Yes.
If the meeting lacks a quorum, no business may take place, and the only action allowed is to seek a quorum. And if no quorum is present, to schedule a new meeting, date, time, location, and adjourn. Minutes should be taken with a record of who was present and the fact that the meeting lacked a quorum, and noting that and noting the date, time, location that was agreed upon for the next meeting.
That was Robert's rules.
No, this is in our updated,
It's in the code,
it's in the
but
role for
Mhm.
the code.
I think it's in the main advisory board part, not the specific to the library. It covers
Yeah.
all the. advisory
Role of the
board.
advisory board.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's not
It's
in any
not
of
in
this
yours?
report. No, it's in the entire city code, not the
It's referencing
library
Robert's
specific.
rules. Okay, cool. Yeah, and I can share this with you too.
Yeah, and I'm assuming if there's any doubt about whether there would be a quorum for that meeting that was decided upon.
We could discuss it. at the-
Or it could be a case where I could send and blind copy you all and say, is it, we have decided on this date and time and location. Are you available? Just as I would do for a other special.
Well, and that's also
Well,
something that could be discussed, sorry, when, at 9 o'clock, when we vote to move to the next meeting, everybody
Mhm.
that's here is gonna be like, well, I'm not gonna be able to make it in 2
Mhm.
weeks, so let's just finish this tonight,
Mhm.
Or like, you know what, I'm tired
Mhm.
and I just spent 2 weeks in Maui.
Mhm.
So I can't afford to go anywhere for like 4 more years, so I'll be here. It's,
Further discussion? Brant, do you have anything to add?
No, nothing really more to add. Thank you, though.
Okay, thank you. Sophia?
Nothing to add.
Any further discussion? Pat, would you call roll?
Sure. See, and this is for scheduling a follow-up meeting automatically 2 weeks after the original date to be used if needed. So let's see. Sherry.
yes.
Okay. Sophia. Let's see, Sophia, maybe try texting.
Yes.
Yay. Okay, Deborah.
Technology.
Okay. See, Charlie. Okay. Grant.
Yes.
Okay. Jack.
Yes.
Okay. And Nina.
Yes.
Okay. Passes.
Okay. Board meeting minutes. And this is doing what we've done recently is pretty much verbatim. Robert's Rules of Order says that the minutes show what was done, not what was said. Any comments on that?
I think it's a good idea, because if we put down what someone says, we don't wanna miss what someone says. I think it's a good idea.
Okay, what's a good idea?
That it not have specificity
Okay,
of that nature.
right.
Right.
I used to do minutes and I would send the rough draft to my boss and he would mark out about 2/3 of it. So I figured that out, so.
And we have the recordings now that are available to the public, so the
Oh, yeah.
things that people say, and, you know, it's there, it's recorded. And so, yeah, the minutes should just, you know, include this is what happened, not what was said, like you said.
Jack?
No, no further comment?
Okay.
Yes, thanks.
Grant, do you have any comments?
I think it makes sense. Thank you.
And Sophia?
I don't know if you noticed, I don't mean to speak for her, but she had a note on the screen that said she
No.
apologized. She's in backcountry Oregon, according to her note, and the
Oh, really?
service is not strong,
Oh, that's what's going on.
is what she just typed, yeah.
Okay. Do we want to make a motion? No? I think everybody's happy, so we can move on.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay. I think you abstained last time and we were wondering about, oh, can we do that? Well, yeah. The question is, when should a board member recuse themselves or abstain from a vote? Any thoughts about that?
Obviously, from our ethics lesson, it would be anytime you have a conflict, which will be rare. However, I would advise that, and this is just, you can take this to heart. When you're appointed a representative slot, you are here to represent opinions of the community. So it's like, it's different when you're an elected official, obviously. As an elected official, you've been voted in by a populace, and it is doing them a disservice to not represent the populace. Recuse yourself because you just don't want to. And so that's a very different idea. But the concept to think about is you're representing a diverse portion of our community. And that's why you've been selected by your body or by the mayor in order to represent that community. So you really shouldn't recuse yourself unless there's a conflict, because you are here to represent. That's the whole point of a representative. So, and again, that's just, take it with a grain of salt, that is your purpose of serving. If you're uncomfortable with that position, then I would recommend asking somebody else to serve in that capacity.
And I believe Robert's Rules of Orders talks about recusing and abstaining, but then says you're not required to. Is that your understanding?
Oh. Usually it's the ruling of the chair.
If there's a conflict.
If there's a conflict, they'll state their reason why they want to recuse themselves, and it's the opinion of the chair whether they have a conflict of interest or not. So
I just abstained because I didn't read the book. So I didn't know how to vote either way because I just didn't have time.
And so the chair
Read
can
the
make a
book,
ruling
so-
if she feels that you don't have enough information.
Yes. And that's absolutely an established reason to say, I don't feel informed enough to make the vote. And that would absolutely be a great established reason. And you're informing the public too.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna make something up, I guess, if I vote, I mean, flip a coin, you know, and I feel like that's, you know, to the people that did put in the time and effort to read the book, you know, me going one way or the other based off of, you know, randomness or, you know, just what I learned in the meeting itself was not, it wasn't fair to anyone. So I said, I'm out. Cause.
So you would appeal to the chair when you want to recuse themselves, and she would make, and in that particular situation, I'm sure she would have agreed.
And is that something you would do before the vote or during the
Before
vote?
the whole motion's made,
Hmm.
you would alert the chair.
Well, the motion has to be made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when the item comes up, well, that's true,
Mm.
but the, you know, when the decision's coming
Yeah.
up and.
Well, I mean, when we did go around for discussion, I did say I didn't read the book, so I get,
Mm.
you know, I have no input, but, I will next
You
time.
excused yourself from.
Well, hopefully, if this comes up again, I have a little more time to read books, but with the holidays, and kids and stuff, was
When,
not.
council member recruits themselves, they're not partaking in any discussion either,
Mm.
because you can influence by the discussion as well.
Yeah, I think there's semantics involved. Abstaining is you don't vote. Recusing, I think, is where you exit from participating is the word.
Yeah, I abstained the vote. I didn't know you could recuse yourself.
You did just fine. Okay. Yeah. Any further discussion on this issue? Adopting a roll call on motions. You know, I think we can anticipate there will be other times when we have people on Zoom, and certainly calling the roll makes it much better.
Yeah, it just makes it clearer. There were a few times in the past couple meetings where it wasn't always totally clear how somebody had voted, and I just want things to be completely clear.
So this will be in the new code, is that right?
Well, made notes that I will copy the code where it's a yay or nay vote. Rather than-
Yeah, I would just add that with respect to the value of transparency, I think it's good to have that record both for historical purposes and just for clearer understanding at the table itself. I think it's just much more transparent.
Well, if people are just listening and not so much watching, hearing the voice.
Yeah.
Or
It
sitting out in the
definitely
office.
helps with the recording,
Yeah.
because when it's so small, you know, and you're watching it and, you know, we're on the TV so far away and it's just like, and all of a sudden, you know, people raise their hand and then it's over like, wait, I didn't see, and you're trying to rewind it and it's just a mess. So it is nice to do the roll call so you can, you know, not have to, because I need glasses, focus on people, sorry.
Okay. OMA rules on work groups, subcommittees. And you had, Ms. Walsh, you'd written a memo on that, which I don't think I did.
And I apologize for any confusion earlier.
Yeah, well, it came up at the last board meeting that a group would be interested in getting together to formulate some wording. And that sounds to me like a work group. And does that need any official blessing from the board as a whole?
Nope, if you ever decide to form a subcommittee to study a topic or make recommendations, you absolutely could. The only rule is if the subcommittee includes 2 or more board members, that it's noticed. And that's really it. As long as you properly notify the public that you're gonna be meeting on it.
Well, when you say you, who is you?
The subcommittee.
So,
So if this body decides I want 2 members to form a subcommittee to talk about
Collection
some-
development policy,
yeah,
I think
some
that was
policy
it. Yeah.
or staffing or whatever it may be to explore an issue separately,
mhm.
you as a board could vote on that, vote to form a subcommittee and who's gonna serve on it and what their scope is. And all you have to remember is that subcommittee would have to work with Kim to properly notice the meeting. Okay, so the public knows this subcommittee is meeting on this topic.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean the public has to participate, they can just sit there and watch,
Mhm.
but they're noticed that this is happening.
Mhm. So this is a subject that, you know, we've been talking about for some time. It would be nice if in April, at the next meeting, we could have some progress. So, does anyone want to make a motion to form a subcommittee to study the wording?
What?
This had to do with the collection.
Yes, and I'm wondering whether discussion, kind of this moves us out of the organizational realm and into the issues.
I would add that as an agenda item,
Yeah.
formation of subcommittee to study.
For April?
Yeah.
Okay. I know I believe it says that we have an election the first meeting of each year. We did not do that in January. We did have an election last April. And I will not be running for chair for the coming year. I'd like to encourage all of you to think about if you would like to be considered, or if you know someone on the board that you would like to nominate. Anyone who self-nominates, I'm not going to ask you if you will accept the nomination. However, if you nominate someone else, I will ask if that person accepts the nomination. Can you explain how Robert's Rules of Orders tells us to do this?
I think I would need to brush up on that a little bit more. Because I think
Because it really doesn't
we did it
say.
last year. Yeah, we did it last April.
Well,
And I'm not sure.
we can research it in the coming month or two.
Yes.
But as I recall,
Mhm.
we accept nominations from the floor. And so
Mm-hmm.
you're candidate number one, next person is number two,
Mhm.
then number three, and on. And so then we vote in the order. So it's like, who wants candidate number one? If that person gets a majority, then the whole process is over. If that person does not get a majority, you move on to candidate two, and so on, till someone gets a majority vote. So it's weird, but I guess it makes sense. So please be thinking about who you'd like to sit in this chair next time. And it helps if that person knows a little bit about Robert's Rules of Order. I do not. But, you know, Ms. Walsh and Ms. Stanker, it's been wonderful to have your support. These meetings have gone much better with you here.
Thank you. I sometimes
Oh,
feel
thank you
like
guys.
a little rusty in the teaching department.
Board member comments?
Yes. Let's go around the table and make any comments. Do you want to start, Deborah?
I don't have any comments.
Okay. Sherry?
Thank you, manager and clerk Stanker, Mrs. Walsh and Mrs. Stanker. This helps. I will get better at this Robert Rules of stuff order. I've never been good at the rules, but I'll figure it out. Probably by the end of my shift or my term. I'll finally, my last meeting, I'll come and be all professional. I'll get there. Thank you
Did
guys.
you get one of these training books?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I read it, but it just,
Well,
it
there's still,
doesn't.
I think Sharon was talking about this procedure at a glance, and so you can, I move, and it kind of gives you some reference material.
Yeah, I've read it
Tips.
and it's, my brain just says, just open your mouth and start talking. I'll train myself out of it.
Jack?
I'd like to thank all board members for their time and participation, staff for their presentations and their attendance as well. I'd like to welcome Sophia to board. It's nice to have a teen advisory group representative again. Grant, welcome back to the board. And I will express my faint amusement that the longest portion of this meeting was in talking about how long the meeting should be. That's all I have. Thank you.
Charlie?
I too would like to welcome Grant back, and even though I wasn't here before, and Sophia, and it's nice to have a full board and have a meeting of the minds. And I look forward to what's coming this year, and I greatly appreciate all the preparation that went into this meeting. And how smoothly it seemed to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Nina?
I repeat all those sentiments that I feel like we covered a lot of material and we're getting out before 9 o'clock, which I'm quite impressed with. There was a lot that we covered and I think all of the handouts that we can reference later are really helpful. We went from a very informal proceedings to trying to train us, and it's really hard when we don't come from the professional background to work in this way professionally. But thank you for all your hard work, and thank you for everyone, because this is the biggest board we've had in years right now at this moment, so it's pretty impressive. Thank you. Good night.
Sophia, do you have any comments?
She just typed one out.
She did. What was it?
I'm Sophia Pilgrim. Thank you for every board member being here and giving me grace.
And Grant?
Yes, thank you, everybody. I'm excited to be back on the board and looking forward to helping the library serve the community as best as it possibly can. I'm really excited, Sophia, that you're on the board as well. Welcome. And I'm looking forward to your perspective as we have our board discussions. And then also, Ms. Pat, if you could just put on the minutes to memorialize moving forward that although basically I'm only on the board representing myself and not as part of any other entity or organization. Just want to make sure we get, just in case.
Yeah,
But thank you very
will do.
much. I'm excited to work with you all.
Will do.
I think we've grown in the last year and a half. We're getting better, we're getting smarter, we're getting more effective. And it's been a pleasure to be part of that painful process. But we are getting better every time. So thank all of you for your part of that. And thank you, Ms. Walsh. Ms. Stanker, you're a wonderful addition to this group.
I'll have a little flyer on the table for nominations on the floor.
Oh, fabulous.
And that way you'll just send that out with your packet or have it on the table, however you want to do it. It's a fairly simple process, unless there's like,
Yes,
it is, it's,
I hope several people step forward. Okay.
otherwise you'll be just, voting in a pro tem, so, real chair can be nominated. You're gonna have somebody run your meeting if you don't get nominated.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it is kind of surprising that there's no vice chair in the.
I know, that's in
Um,
here too.
Because if I'm on my deathbed, I'd have to come.
Well, when our organizational meetings, we always vote in a vice chair because that way you're not dealing with that pro tem process every time the chair is unavailable or has to be away. So it's just a good thing to have.
I'm sorry to ask, but so you'll still be the chair until somebody else gets voted in, right?
We're gonna have the election really up high on the agenda. I looked at last April's agenda and we got through the business part and then we did the election. And somebody else served as chair during that whole election process. Because I was running also. So because I'm not running again, then I'll stay through that process. I'm looking forward to sitting in one of your chairs.
So you're not resigning your seat, just your
No,
position?
I'll be on for another 2 years.
Okay.
And by then I'll be really old. Time to sit and knit, I think. Anything else?
Let's see, I think we have future agenda items.
Okay. Well, we do have some future agenda items out of tonight's meeting.
Right. So we've got the proposal to create a work group on the collection development policy.
Mm-hmm.
And there are other things as well, which I will find and put
Time.
discussion of the agenda items, limiting the number, or did we vote
Oh,
on that?
yeah.
I think we voted to talk about that at the next meeting.
Right, right. And does the chair vote?
And then, can I ask, did everything get, have we addressed the remaining agenda items from the previous meeting with this list tonight?
Those were the first three on the new business or organizational matters. Those was the first three on the organizational matters.
But if there are any other future agenda items, they could be added.
I'm
By
trying to
form.
remember the January meeting. And any other items that we had earmarked for the April meeting?
No, the agenda items were all
Oh,
addressed here.
all right. We are adjourned.